So yeah, but it is a good transition in the other vaccine mandate lawsuits that were filed. Again, all of that will be has been detailed, will be detailed again this week at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, all the medical components, the scientific components. But on the legal aspects, a lawsuit filed against Rutgers on grounds that Rutgers is violating state and federal law as well as constitutional principles in mandating the vaccine. Lawsuit won in Louisiana because a federal court determined that Louisiana has its own version of the federal religious freedoms law. And so the federal court said that the vaccine mandate and the social distancing mandate and the masking mandate could not meet strict scrutiny. It was very interesting, by the way, that Canada appears to have the same strict scrutiny type analysis to its supposed exception that's present here.
Yeah, we just our courts don't seem to apply it. But I know I've asked
neither are a lot of ours right now.
Well, no, but I've asked this before. We use the word mandate. We are using it reflexively, and I would dare say, without question, who mandates these? Who has mandated anybody to do anything? Now, we're a mask mandate. A democratically elected government does not have, I mean, am I wrong? They don't have a mandate just to do anything because they were democratically elected. So how are we using the term mandate to effectively bypass any meaningful legislative process?
It's extraordinary. I mean, there's multiple issues. One is whether they have the constitutional authority to mandate in the first place. The second is whether or not it meets constitutional scrutiny, even if they have the constitutional authority. And the third is whether it's gone through the constitutional tripartite method of government we're supposed to have with checks and balances. And so far, it fails all three of those tests. But the problem is one of those checks and balances, the judiciary, is only sporadically stepping up to the plate. Supreme Court stepped up on CDC eviction moratorium this week. They've stepped up on churches in past weeks. And a federal court in Louisiana said it's a violation of your religious rights to punish you for your assertion of a religious exemption to a vaccine mandate by requiring you go through mask mandates and go through social distancing and mark yourself like with a yellow star, like we're in a prior era. And I think Mark Dice could probably do one of his little surveys on the ground and probably get a bunch of liberals to say, do you think that people that have been unvaccinated, it's probably a good idea that they wear something to let you know, like maybe a yellow star? You'll probably get a bunch of people saying, yeah.
They actually gave away a golden star to people who got vaccinated, and it was intended to be a thank you, well done star, like in kindergarten. Didn't go over well, but and people get offended by the analogy. Skip the golden star analogy. How about just a QR code that says check, you can enter? I mean, we've replaced the hyperbolic inflammatory icons with QR codes, and somehow that's more palatable. But the QR code to designate which humans can enter and which cannot based on medical status, irregardless or irrespective of medical conditions that preclude them from getting it or religious exemptions, the QR code is going to go down in history as a similar, if not identical to that. But we'll talk in 20 years.
And of course, a lot of this medical information is already being hacked in other contexts. I think they did it in Canada, actually.
Yeah, no, they were hacking it. And the hackers, anybody who doesn't know this, hackers revealed that this allegedly secure system for the QR code could be hacked easily. And all that anybody needed to know is your full name, which is very easy to get, and where you got vaccinated, which is typically also very easy to know because it's in geographic locations. You could falsify the QR code. You could falsify everything. And the government is now talking about getting the authorities on the hackers who revealed the weakness to prosecute them criminally, as opposed to thanking them in theory for having exposed the weaknesses. But we're to believe that this stupid app is going to work properly as of September 2nd. And the government, now we might know why the government's setting aside a $1 billion COVID vaccine passport fund, because they piss away money because they're incompetent, corrupt scoundrels who have no problem blowing other people's money on unconstitutional crap. Sorry, that was actually as far as off I'm going to go. Yeah. But yeah,
more suits filed. Another suit was filed in Maine on behalf of nurses because they weren't being allowed to assert a religious objection, suing on grounds that violated the First Amendment right to religious expression, suing on the grounds that it violated the Civil Rights Bill. People forget the Civil Rights Act of 1964 includes prohibition of discrimination on religious basis. Filed a suit in Michigan on behalf of those people who had prior infection, saying that there's absolutely no reason for them to have to also go through a vaccinated treatment, and showing the factual and legal issues, arguing unconstitutional conditions, violation of the right to bodily autonomy as secured by the 9th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. the lawsuit that won in Louisiana, the suit that was filed on behalf of the military in Colorado, that is still viable because, and so all of those suits were filed. I've already covered them at vivabarneslaw.locals.com in detail. We'll be covering the additional ones being filed this week. Suits likely coming in all across the nation. There was also a class action filed in Florida on the grounds the vaccine mandate there was going to leave the city without essential infrastructure employees, that they already had shortages, and the shortages would be so bad they might not be able to run their utilities in Gainesville because of how many employees they would lose.
And Robert, we have the problem here. I went to the hospital last week and I was talking to a nurse and a doctor. Like, yeah, we have a shortage of staff. We have problems maintaining the infrastructure we have, treating the people we have. They're imposing a vaccine passport that is going to cause even more people to leave, and federal and provincial. And it's like the government thrives off exacerbating the problems with unconstitutional measures. And by the way, in British Columbia, at the very least, there were no medical exemptions and there were no religious exemptions to the vaccine passport. It is, we get what we elect, and if people want to continue down this path, they know exactly who to vote for. Now, I want to read one super chat from Rumble, which is Chris Rumble says, Rumble rant fee is 20% better than our competitors. Viva and Barnes make more when you tip here. Chris, thank you very much. And Rumble, thank you very much. Viva, angry, Viva smash.
And that's a good transition. The other big argument, because it impacts all these lawsuits pending, is there was confusion this week about exactly what the FDA actually did. So on Monday, the FDA issued a biologic license approval to biotech for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that they said was medically interchangeable with the existing emergency use authorized vaccine. But then they did something weird. They then also continued and extended the emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine and for the Moderna vaccine, and I believe the J&J vaccine. And that confused people because under the emergency use authorization law, you have to revoke emergency use authorization the moment you have an FDA-approved biologic license for treatment of that disease. So everybody's like, what the heck is this? So you had to dig in, and it was basically, it reminded me of an old Huey Long story of High Papa Lorem and Low Papa Hiram. So Huey Long told the story that there was a snake oil salesman that traveled Louisiana, and he had one product that cured half of your illnesses, and he had another product that cured the other half of your illnesses. And one was called High Papa Lorem, and the other was called Low Papa Hiram. And somebody asked this salesman, well, how do you make those? And he said, oh, you make this one from the bark off the tree. You make it from tree bark. And they're like, well, how do you make the other one? Oh, you make that one from tree bark too. And they're like, well, what in the world's the difference? Oh, big difference, the snake oil salesman described. J.P. Rockefeller's granddaddy was a snake oil salesman, by the way, literally. Maybe, and he's involved in a lot of this stuff these days if you dig in the Rockefeller Foundation. But basically he said, well, this one here, the High Papa Lorem, you make by skinning the bark off the tree from the bottom up. He goes, the other one, totally different. Low Papa Hiram, you make from skinning the bark off the tree from the top down. And Huey Long applied it to the political context of the day. He said the only difference when I got to Washington between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is one of them wants to skin you from the ankle up, and the other one wants to skin you from the ear down. So but this is basically what the FDA has done. They're saying, yeah, we've approved this vaccine over here, but it's not widely available. You're like, what are you talking about? It's the same one that's out. You just said it's medically interchangeable with the one they're giving right now. And they're like, well, no, but it doesn't have the label on it, you see. It doesn't have the label. And if you know FDA's, so it's literally Low Papa Hiram, High Papa Lorem. Yeah, they're the same, but they're totally different. Now, legally, they are very different because legally, one of them isn't subject to emergency use authorization informed consent rules. One of the FDA-approved vaccine doesn't have the same clear legal requirements that an emergency use authorization does. Also, for Pfizer's purposes, there is clearly no liability for the emergency use authorized vaccine. It's not clear if there's no liability for the approved one. So Pfizer doesn't want their approved one out. They want the emergency use authorized one out.
Or they just want to suck and blow at the same time, and they want to carve the tree from both ends and make the most of it and not be held to any sort of
Well,
ability.
and Moderna and J&J don't want the only one to be out as Pfizer's. So the game the FDA played was the military and employers for mandates. They want to pretend that what they're mandating is the FDA approved one, so they don't have to deal with the emergency use authorization statute and whether that limits informed consent as a precondition. I personally think informed consent is required across the board. It's just legally, there's a stronger argument with EUA than there is with biological licensed ones. But to me, the argument should be identical. But that's the legal. So they played it. It was a bait and switch. They made it look like that they had approved the FDA one, and that the FDA had approved one, and that's the one that would be mandated. But the one being mandated right now cannot be that one because according to the FDA, that one's not widely available at the moment.
All right, that is I'm going to have to go back and listen to this to make sure I understood it, because it sounds like chicanery. If I do say so myself. I was reading your tweets on it earlier,